Look how crypto is in a key macro structural zone, and we're going to see the same in Bitcoin. Now, let's talk about this. We're going to see the same in Ethereum. We see the same in BNB as well as in Solana. In TRX, we will also analyze the situation since it's interesting, and XRP, which is going its own damn way, is another story. But today, we're going to focus on assets like BNB and TRX, which we haven't covered yet. We're removing ADA and DOT from our list because we believe BNB and TRX will provide much more valuable information right now, which you'll appreciate. Now, that being said, let's talk about MicroStrategy. It's in that defensive zone, just as we've been discussing. Here, we can extract an important moral. This is a defense zone. Even though it's not immediately obvious, we know from Bitcoin and Ethereum that what we're witnessing here in this upward move is a Z pattern. It's a Z pattern with a defensive zone that we originally, or should I say, uniquely identified. The S pattern's trend line runs right through here. Now, the big question is now to be the smartest in the room and say, yes, I have the formula and this is going to break, so we'll enter a bear market. Because if the structure collapses, rest assured, we'd be heading into a bear market. However, from experience, we know it's not a good idea to try and reverse a Z pattern. Soon, you'll see this play out with TRX. What happens when you try to reverse the Z pattern? If you want to feel clever, predicting where all that directional momentum will end. Well, since we don't consider ourselves smarter than anyone else here, we won't be trying to reverse the market. Let the market tell us when it's ready to change its trend. Once the market confirms it, we'll follow along and evaluate that bear market. But that hasn't happened yet. So, with that out of the way, let's drop the first little knucker. On a macro level, we are in very favorable zones for buying crypto in spot. We're in great zones, even with potential declines in climatic stocks, which we believe could get even better. These are excellent zones for looking for long entries. In spot. We're not talking futures here. You know that we always talk about futures trading, but today we'll focus a bit more on the long term. And later we'll get back to futures, but we're starting with a long term for now. We're in pretty key moments right now, to be honest. Okay, we know it's a Z pattern, and we're inside its structure with MicroStrategy. Alright, take a look at Bitcoin. Here, it looks like we're in no man's land. This defense zone seems like we completely made it up because, honestly, what the hell is it doing here? Well, let's go to the 4-hour chart, and there, we'll see how the anchor point is vital. It's spectacular. These anchor points are the ones we like the most. They're telling us, hey, something's happening here, and in the future, you'll remember me. The future has arrived. And look, we do remember it. Notice how, with this aggressive climatic action, the body of the candles. See where they're closing and with what volume, of course. How strategic. In short, I'm justifying why that defense zone exists and why it's there. And at the same time, what do we see in Bitcoin compared to MicroStrategy? Here's a question for you. Does it matter if Bitcoin drops a little further, about 15 centimeters below where it is right now? Would that be the end of the world? Would tragedy be confirmed? The fact that we've correctly identified where the macro structure is gives us the advantage that if we see the asset drop, it's not a big deal. It's protected here. We'll see if it collapses, but the message is that a drop is not the end of the world. If Bitcoin tells us that a drop isn't the end of the world, it's telling us that MicroStrategy could look like it's going to hell, but we might just be facing a classic structural trap that will recover and move on. That's why I said at the macro level, for spot trading, we're in key areas to consider entering. Sure, things could go wrong, of course, but we have to ask ourselves, what are we looking for, right? This is a Z pattern, and if it doesn't collapse downward, what does the Z do? It continues with strength. What do we want to look for? That extreme point to catch an explosion. So the stop loss can be set very tight because we're aiming for a big reward. That's why, on a macro level, for spot trading in the long term, I think September could be a good month to start building a position, and if it goes wrong, then it goes wrong. You lose a little, and it's no big deal. We'll look for the next macro opportunity at another time. In the end, it could be confirming a bear market, but luckily, we have a stop loss that limits our loss. Why? Because we know the implications of the type of behavior we see on the chart. Alright, let's take a look at Ethereum. Ethereum, on the daily time frame, as you know, has the Z pattern, the trend line of the Z, and unlike other assets, Ethereum's structure did collapse, and now we're seeing the consequences of that. Luckily, Bitcoin, MicroStrategy, BNB, Solana, and TRX haven't done this. Ethereum has been doing its own thing, really. It's broken away doing its own thing, but there's no need to regret it, no need to feel bad. It's simply working with a different structure, and that's it. There's nothing more to it. Alright, now that this is explained, what do we see in Ethereum? In Ethereum, we also see a key anchor point where the price is currently working. It's the same as before, right? If they want, they can manipulate manipulate it. They can do anything. They can trick us, and it's no big deal. They can build something here, and we'll see what happens. Maybe Ethereum isn't the best place to look for spot buys. Maybe there are other assets to consider before Ethereum. But then again, maybe not. Look at what we have here with Ethereum. We have the classic macro bullish impulse. This is a W, this is a weak buy, and this is a full-blown Z. When these aggressive Z patterns finally break to the upside, they tend to seek a very strong recovery, very aggressive. So yes, I'm adjusting what I said in real time, and it actually makes sense to consider Ethereum as well. Seeing this, which I hadn't realized a few minutes ago, yes, it makes sense. So with Ethereum, look, we're in a Z pattern, but in reverse, right? And that's the trend line of the Z. Hey, when we get a positive black swan here, we already know what we'll be looking for. But of course, we'll want to look for the opposite extremes to be as well positioned as possible. This cross-analysis is what helps us identify these kinds of key and extreme structures. As I said before, they can manipulate the market, but it's not the end of the world if they do. They can do it, and it's not the end of the world. That's the message. All right. Now let's move on to BNB. I've already mentioned that on the weekly time frame, you can clearly see the key structure of the Z pattern. At this point, I think everyone knows it, right? The bearish impulse, the W, the weak EI, and the aggressive Z. That Z pattern with its wedge has been broken. Now it's working on the trend line of the Z, and it's doing its thing here. Everyone's wondering whether this is going to collapse or offer us a spectacular entry point for seeking continuation. Basically, that's what we're evaluating in the crypto ecosystem. With that in mind, we move down to the daily time frame, and we can see we're at, as mentioned, an extreme point. It might look like there's a floating line here, but we understand why that is. It's quite hidden, and once again, we find ourselves in a classic market extreme. Maybe BNB won't give you the cleanest, most obvious entry. For that, we have other assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and as we'll see later, Solana, TRX, and others. But well, BNB helps us map things out. It's quite clear with BNB, and here we're speculating about a future creek, basically. As for Solana, it's more of the same. This is all a Z pattern, and you already know that this is a Z. It's part of a complex and aggressive corrective pattern. Here's the trend line of the Z, which we've transformed into a defense zone just to understand how prices are impacting it now. Notice how the price has defended itself here again and again up to the present. That said, you also know we're keeping track of all this buy-sell movement, treating the price as part of an inverse corrective pattern. Here, we imagine the bullish impulse with the W here, the weak EI, and this is the Z, and we're working on the trend line of the Z. I think that's pretty clear. And the same hypothesis applies here, right? If we say we don't want to be smarter than everyone else, we don't want to reverse the market, then hey, we shouldn't assume that this is going to break and go all the way up. Well, we shouldn't take that for granted. Maybe we'll see the classic trap play out, right? I come in, make it look like a breakout, but oops, sorry, I continue. And perhaps here we'll get a climatic action, right? An impulse, a channel, a range, a tricky climatic action, a trap on a macro structure, which is the trend line of the macro Z. And the same thing we've been waiting for here, we'd wait for here, but on a macro level. Basically by not wanting to reverse the market, which, based on experience, is by far the best or most prudent thing we can do. It's the way by far that things will work out better for us in the long term. We must be cautious with the market. We've tried many times in the past to reverse a Z pattern, and we know what happens. Exceptions must be made. It's true that there are Z patterns where it's worth betting on reversing the market, so to speak. But for that to happen, we need to see an impact in key structural zones and work on a cross-analysis that supports that hypothesis, something that today I wouldn't really bet on. Here we have Solana. I think we've explained that. Let's move on to TRX. All right, let's explain this calmly. Here's Tron, all right? It's no surprise that Tron is performing so well, huh? It's no surprise that Tron's chart looks the way it does because of the great work they're doing with transactions on their blockchain. Is anyone surprised to see this chart, folks? In silence, it's become the leading blockchain, right? Or one of the leading blockchains for transactions. How's our friend Link doing? Now we'll share it with you, but first, welcome to Crypto Insight, your ethical and moral channel for cryptocurrency technical analysis. Here, we really know what we're talking about. We conduct advanced technical analysis that has been developed for over 12 years. We upload videos several times a week. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, let me know and leave a comment with your opinion. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell so you don't miss the next opportunity. Link needs to rise now and not drop much further. Well, it's gone to the ore. I don't like Link, but well, it'll rise if Bitcoin rises. Obviously, if Bitcoin goes up, so will Link, and we've seen how Link can perform. It rises strongly. I'm not saying it's a bad asset, I'm just commenting that structurally I don't like it. But that doesn't mean it can't rise sharply. If Bitcoin rises, so will Link. In fact, today, it's up by 4%. Link is rising strongly today. In the end, I think we can all agree that the blockchain business network is very complex to understand. But I think we can all grasp in a very simple way that what's good, cheap, and efficient works. And Tron embodies those characteristics in its business model, which is a blockchain for transferring value. They do it well, cheaply and quickly. That's it. When things are done well, there's always a reward, a result. We all know that's how life works, more or less. All right, let's move on to Tron. Look at Tron. First, I'll go over this quickly, all right? This was a key macro defense zone, very important. On the other hand, here we have a bearish impulse. This is its W, its weak I. All of this is a Z, okay? We need to be 100% tuned into this message. This is a Z, it's important, huh? Like Bitcoin, Ethereum, BNB, like Solana. We're all here, right? That's why the market has risen so much lately. Do you understand why the market has gone up so much? Because we've been working on a Z. All those things we always talk about in Crypto Insight. The corrective pattern, the complex corrective pattern, the W, the weak Y, the aggressive Z. All these concepts we always explain actually show why the crypto market has surged so much in the last few months. Now, for the past month or two, the market has been moving sideways, kind of fooling around. That's because we're fighting against the Z guidelines, right? It's part of the game. But the point is, we've gone up a lot because of this. We've risen a lot because of this. Then, of course, a macro news story comes along as a catalyst for the movement. Initially, they worked on a wedge for that Z, and we all agree that it broke, and it went searching for a structure which is the Z guideline. Since we're not the smartest in the room and we don't want to reverse the market from a Z because it's not prudent, the price tried, failed, and continued rising. That's what we're evaluating at a macro level for the entire crypto ecosystem. Now Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana they're all here. At some point, the structure of a Z collapses and they'll aim for those very, very low levels. That's when we'd be talking about a bear market. Eventually, they'll do it, but they may try several times, and when they fail, do you see the consequences of failing a structural break? Do you see the continuity of the Z and how it behaves? Do you understand why I say that for long-term spot positions, this week and the next are good times to start building a position for the long term? Because here, you set your stop loss and look at the take profit. Am I making sense? Things spot. That's where we are. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. It could definitely fail, of course. Nobody has the absolute truth. Nothing is guaranteed. If they did, no one would be here discussing this. That's simple. That's simple. But you see the analogy, right? At the structural level. If we understand how smart money moves the market, what kind of structure is used, what it means to break it or not, what we can expect, and what a market extreme is. Are you connecting the dots in your mind? Because the message I'm sending you, in my opinion, has a lot of value. But of course, you have to understand it. It's incredibly valuable. Much better than using an RSI, a MACD, a moving average, or a head and shoulders pattern. Okay, so we said, right? That at a macro level. Regarding this bearish impulse, all of this is a macro Z. At some point, it tried to break here, but it failed, so the Z continued. This is still a Z, right? A macro Z. Are you with me? That's where we are still, right? Now, if we zoom in a little and look here, that Z, that wedge that broke was the guideline of the Z, but it couldn't break through. At the same time, it's also an impulse. Here, it has its corrective pattern, the WWII, and this is clearly a Z, clearly. And all of this is an accumulation process that has led us to an upward movement. But what I want to tell you is that we're living through a micro Z, and now we're at the guideline of the micro Z. That's where we are. So it's like history is repeating itself from a fractal perspective. Okay, on one hand, what's happening? I'm seeing Tron very overextended because it's a macro Z that's being stretched, and now we're working on another micro Z, which yes, it can fail and overextend, but we'd already be overextending. And yeah, I'm not going to be the smartest one here to say, hey guys, no, today's the day. Today, all the ZS collapsed downward. Bear market. No, I'm never going to pretend to be the smart one who gives that message, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep an eye on Tron, because Tron is telling us that things are heating up. But watch out. You look at Bitcoin, MicroStrategy, Ethereum, BNB, Solana. And like I said, we're in a really good spot for the long term. For spot positions, even if there are bearish climactic actions, it's a great time to buy. Here, a micro Z could simply collapse. Here, they go for the structure and they even trick you, but it's not the end of the world and the Z continues. It's not such a big deal. And it doesn't mean that Tron is telling us to disregard everything else. There's a way to cross this, like I just just explained, and it's fine. But Tron could experience strong volatility soon, that's for sure. I'm quite clear on that. Tron could face volatility. We'll see in which direction, though. Alright, let's see what opportunities we can find for futures trading in smaller time frames, like the 1 hour chart. Later, you guys can tell me what you're up to, whether you're going long, short, or what your ideas are. Remember, nobody here has the absolute truth. Not me, not anyone, so don't hesitate to share your thoughts. That's the point, for all of us to share what we're thinking. Alright, here's Bitcoin at a macro level. Oscar says he's waiting for a short entry. At what macro level are we now? We've got a bearish impulse in the micro on the 1 hour time frame for Bitcoin. This is a channel. This was a range, a climactic action. Euge and I were asking ourselves if this was the final point to look for an upward movement. It's a possibility. Honestly, we don't know, but what we see clearly is that the channel could simply continue. The range could still form here. Sorry, to look for a true climactic action later that could aim for that Bitcoin defense zone we talked about, or even, why not, set a trap on the structure and then not reverse the macro Z but look upwards. So prudence invites us to look upward on a macro level, okay? But we're trying to see if a bearish climactic action might be coming, as the crypto market is suggesting. And if it might come, we want to understand how they could do it. That's how I think they could do it, not how we think they could do it. That said, what else are we seeing, right? Well, we're seeing that this Bitcoin drop is extremely aggressive, very, very aggressive. And we have to be cautious with this recovery. We have to be careful. It's true that we could trace a creek here and say, hey, they're not accumulating, they're heading up. Okay, yes, but be cautious. You've got the Empire State Building falling, and you're building an upward movement with the building where you live, which is nothing next to the Empire State. So, we have to be cautious. All right, let's continue with Bitcoin. As I said, we've got the fall of the Empire State, and this rise needs to be taken carefully. Okay, you can see it more clearly in other assets, but here they're working on the classic rising wedge, and we'll see where it decides to collapse. They'll pick up momentum or something. Well, we're speculating around $56,800, which could be a key point. Maybe that's where to look for a short. Why? Because hey, those drops make sense. We're looking for a climactic move. Maybe it won't happen, but that's the idea we have in mind, right? That's why it makes sense to look for shorts around that area. For Ethereum, the equivalent would be at $2,400, right? The climactic action, we could set a creek here, a micro defense zone where they pull a little trick and it heads up. The classic move, well, let it rise and we'll see where to short. For me, this point is good for finding the short. This spot could be a trap zone as usual. Let's see if they continue forming that wedge. Let it rise, let them collapse it, and then we go for the short. We're looking for that directionality and we'll see if they give it to us. It's true that historically, September is the most bearish month in traditional markets. That's why today, September 9th, we opened this stream by talking about traditional markets first. Just look at the downward potential in the SP, the Nasdaq. We're saying that there's no key macro structure like in crypto. That's why it makes sense to buy into these drops, because September is bearish, so let it drop, as it usually does, and look for those long-term spot entries. But on a micro level, we can take advantage of that statistical bias and look for shorts. That's why we're looking for shorts in Bitcoin here, and why we're also looking for shorts in Ethereum here. As I said, I think I've already drawn the picture for Ethereum, showing where to look for shorts and all that. Key areas to find shorts. Ethereum has some trap scenarios here where they could play their games, and we'll look for that directionality. All right, let's check out BNB. With BNB, it's the same thing. I'd like to see a trap for sure. I'd be looking for BNB in traps because it's quite close. A climactic action. That's where we could be looking for a potential short. Let's see if they want to do it. Let's see if they want to make that move because we're in that channel now. We'll see if they form the range here to look for a climactic action and then decide to go up. We're just looking for ways to enter short based on the concept of climactic action. With Solana, it's very clear. We need to be looking here. Solana at $136, also a trap scenario, of course. Let's see if it rises that much. Hopefully it does. It's a selling zone, and then we go short to look for a tricky climactic action. Let's hope it rises tomorrow. And now let's analyze the traditional market. Notice how Nikkei is in a key situation, just like the S&P 500 and Nasdaq. And more importantly, look at the structures. They give us a big clue about what their next move might be. Remember the correlation between the traditional market and crypto, and I'm sharing our traditional market analysis in the video you're watching now, so don't hesitate for a second and click on the video. Watch it now. I guarantee you won't regret it. Click now. Do it right away.